Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. North Korea's top negotiator has just arrived in Washington to meet America's top diplomat Mike Pompeo and perhaps President Trump himself. They will likely finalize plans to announce a second North Korea-U.S. summit. Seeing an enormous market opportunity and grasping it with both hands, President Moon Jae-in vows to ensure South Korea becomes a global powerhouse in the hydrogen vehicle market. Plus, US President Donald Trump responds to Nancy Pelosi's call to delay the State of the Union over the government shutdown. He says she can make her planned trip to Belgium, Egypt, and Afghanistan, but only if she flies commercial. So, our top story this morning. North Korea's top nuclear negotiator is now in Washington. He's carrying a letter from the regime's leader. At the same time, the North's vice foreign minister is in Europe, and some watchers have suggested Son-hui could meet with her American counterpart Stephen Biegun in Stockholm. Lots going on, and it all points to arrangements for a long-anticipated second summit between Kim Jong-un and US President Donald Trump. Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
The North Korean leader's right-hand man, Kim Yong-chol, is now in Washington, reportedly carrying Kim Jong-un's letter to President Trump. The North Korean envoy was spotted arriving in Beijing on Thursday afternoon. He caught a plane bound for Washington in the evening and landed there on Thursday evening local time. Kim will stay overnight in Washington, the first such case for a North Korean official since 2000, and meet with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Friday. It's likely he'll meet President Trump too, as according to CNN, he's carrying Kim Jong-un's letter to Trump, a reply to Trump's letter that was delivered over the weekend. This comes as North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Son-hui arrived in Sweden. She previously told reporters she's attending an international conference in the Scandinavian country. But because she's North Korea's U.S. expert and one of the key figures related to the nuclear negotiations, observers say she could meet U.S. officials in Stockholm. The Washington Post reports if the high-level talks go well between Kim Yong-chol and Mike Pompeo, U.S. officials are expecting Son-hui and U.S. nuclear envoy Stephen Biegun to meet for the first time in Sweden. The newspaper adds the time and location of the second North Korea-U.S. summit could be announced as soon as Friday, and it says the summit is likely to be held in the Vietnamese city of Da Nang in March or April. But amid the dialogue momentum, the U.S. is remaining tight-lipped on Kim Yong-chol's trip to the U.S. Asked if the State Department had plans to announce any meetings involving the visiting official, a spokesperson said there were no meetings to announce. President Trump often takes to Twitter to announce North Korea-related news, but he has not mentioned the regime or its leader in recent days. Despite the silence from the U.S., the two sides are expected to sit down with each other soon. Watchers say the key will be finding middle ground on their respective demands and take a step closer to reaching a deal of the North's denuclearization. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And at such a sensitive moment, the United States has released a missile defense strategy report. The report highlights concerns about Iran, Russia and China, but also focuses on how North Korea's advanced missile capabilities are a serious threat to the United States. Park Hee-jun with the details.
The latest missile defense review released by the Pentagon calls North Korea an extraordinary threat. The report that was unveiled on Thursday says the North has invested considerable resources in its nuclear and ballistic missile programs over the past decade. It has also engaged in nuclear missile testing as well as other provocative actions. And as a result, the regime has the capability to threaten the U.S. mainland with a nuclear-armed missile attack. It says Washington will maintain and enhance its defense against such rapidly advancing missile capabilities. It's the first missile defense strategy review to be released in 9 years. Concerning the review, U.S. President Donald Trump reiterated the need to protect Americans from these concerns.
all over, foreign adversaries, competitors, and rogue regimes are steadily enhancing their missile arsenals all over. As president, my first duty is the defense of our country. First duty, the defense of our country.
But the report also says there is a possible new avenue for peace. According to the report, the U.S. is committed to diplomatic efforts with the regime to resolve the issue. The report comes at a sensitive time when Trump is trying to revive these stalled denuclearization talks. Coming on the day of North Korea's top nuclear negotiator Kim Jong-chol's visit to Washington, the strategy is being viewed as a push to pressure the North to denuclearize. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, South Korea's intelligence chief, Son-hui, reportedly visited Washington last week ahead of those big talks between North Korea and the U.S. Diplomatic sources familiar with the matter said that the director of Seoul's National Intelligence Service visited the U.S. Capitol Sunday last week and met with CIA Chief Gina Haspel. No other information was provided about what was discussed. North Korea remains one of the world's most repressive states, and leader Kim Jong-un is exercising almost complete political control. This is according to a report by international human rights organization Human Rights Watch. The report says the regime in Pyongyang not only restricts people's civil and political freedoms, but also routinely uses arrests, punishment, torture and even execution to maintain fear and control over its people. Citizens are forced under harsh, unpaid labor to build infrastructure, and those repatriated from China while trying to escape to South Korea are severely punished and tortured. The organization urged key international actors to raise these issues. It pointed out that despite many summits with Kim Jong-un, South Korea, the US and China didn't bring these issues up. South Korea's defense ministry summoned Japan's military attache on Thursday to convey strong protests over Tokyo's actions over their ongoing radar spat. Seoul stressed all the facts used by its spokesperson were correct regarding a press conference on Monday's working-level discussions held in Singapore between the two countries on this tussle that we've been reporting on over the past several days. This is in response to Tokyo's defense ministry summoning South Korea's military attache Wednesday to claim that what Seoul said during the briefing was not correct in regards to this incident involving a South Korean warship and a Japanese patrol aircraft. South Korea also says Japan had broken an agreement not to release the contents of the discussions before the end of the talks. Let's start our world news in the United States. Lots going on there as per usual. President Trump has postponed House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's upcoming overseas trip in an apparent payback for asking him to reschedule his State of the Union speech, which was set for later this month. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn as we always do, to our Noah Adam. So Adam, more arguments and heated words between the pair who clearly don't see eye to eye on many things at all. This all coming amid the ongoing government shutdown.
That's right, Mark. The stalemate continues, and by the looks of things, seems to be getting worse, in fact. Trump wrote a letter to Pelosi on Thursday saying that her trip to Belgium, Egypt and Afghanistan was being pushed back due to what he called the government shutdown. He also called her upcoming trip a public relations event that would be rescheduled for after the government reopens. But he added that Pelosi could take a commercial flight rather than a military one if she so wished. The president's letter came just a day after Pelosi urged him to postpone his State of the Union address, citing the shutdown. Lawmakers blasted Trump for revealing Pelosi's overseas trip. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff said the president was being irresponsible.
I'm not going to comment on the Speaker's travel plans. Frankly, There has been far too much said about that already, and I think the President's decision to disclose a trip that a speaker is making to a war zone was completely and utterly irresponsible in every way. And I'm not going to comment on the speaker's travel plans.
Pelosi's spokesman, meanwhile, said the speaker's trip was intended to express appreciation to U.S. troops and reaffirm America's commitment to NATO. U.S. lawmakers usually don't publicize upcoming foreign trips for security reasons. The speaker normally uses a military plane, which Trump, of course, has control of as commander-in-chief. At least 10 people have been killed and dozens others injured in a car bombing in Colombia's capital. Thursday's incident occurred outside a police academy in southern Bogota, leaving streets and vehicles charred and smashing windows of nearby apartments. The driver has been identified as 57-year-old Jose Aldemar Rojas Rodriguez, who also died in the blast. His car was believed to be carrying 80 kilograms of the powerful explosive pentalite, which has been used in the past by Colombia's leftist guerrilla groups as well as drug cartels. President Ivan Duque called the incident a crazy terrorist act and vowed to bring those responsible to justice. It is yet unclear if the driver had any links to any rebel groups. Meanwhile, there are about 950 Koreans living in Bogota, and as of yet, they are not among the casualties. U.S. lawmakers have proposed a bill that would ban the sale of American chips and other components to Chinese tech firms deemed to have violated U.S. sanctions. Federal prosecutors are reportedly investigating Huawei on suspicion of stealing trade secrets from T-Mobile, a move likely to escalate already tense U.S.-China trade ties. Huawei said in a statement that it had settled the dispute with the telecoms giant 2 years ago. Chinese tech firm ZTE has also been accused of spying for the Chinese government, allegations it denies. The introduction of the bill also prompted an angry response from Beijing.
I have noticed the relevant news, which I felt was hysteria. I believe the action of these few representatives are an expression of extreme arrogance and an extreme lack of self-confidence.
A Japanese court has fined a 66-year-old man for posting hate speech targeted at a teenage resident from Korea, the first such ruling in the country. The Kawasaki court also ordered Yuji Takashita to remove the defamatory remarks from his blog titled Virulent Alien Parasites named Zainichi. Zainichi is often used to describe Korean residents in Japan who are a frequent target of racial abuse by Japanese people. Takashita claimed he had no intent to insult the boy and treated the blog as a diary. The 16-year-old's lawyers called on the government in Tokyo to implement stricter regulations to curb online hate speech and protect potential victims.
Thank you as always to Arirang for the world news there. Now to some news that doesn't bode well for this country in the future. New figures show South Korea's total fertility rate for 2018 is expected to drop below 1, according to the Presidential Committee on Aging Society and Population Policy on Friday. Last year's total fertility rate is projected to record 0.96, with around 325,000 births in the country. The fertility rate is down from 1.05 in 2017 and is the lowest rate on record since Statistics Korea started collating the data. The rate is defined as the total number of children that would be born to each woman if she were to live to the end of her childbearing years. South Korea's fertility rate ranks the lowest among 35 countries in the OECD. President Moon Jae-in has been highlighting the importance of ushering in the era of the hydrogen economy. Visiting the southeastern city of Ulsan on Thursday, the president pledged government help to sharply increase the number of hydrogen-powered vehicles produced here in South Korea. Hwang Ho-jun with the details.
A golden opportunity for South Korea to fundamentally shift away from fossil fuels and build the new growth engines that are the hydrogen economy. According to President Moon Jae-in, this revolutionary change is a must.
수소 경제가 태동하기 시작한 지금 세계 시장 선점이 중요합니다. 수소 경제를 위한 우리 정부의 의지는 확고합니다.
President Moon was speaking on a visit to the southeastern city of Ulsan, home to many hydrogen-based businesses. It was the president's first domestic tour of 2019, aimed at boosting local economies outside of Seoul. While meeting with business leaders, President Moon insisted that South Korea already has a competitive edge. He underscored that the country is the first in the world to mass-produce hydrogen cars. Also, he noted 99% of the parts are made locally, and Korea holds about 50% of the world's hydrogen car market.
2030년 수소차와 연료전지에서 모두 세계 시장 점유율 1위를 하는 것이 우리의 목표입니다.
To realize this goal, President Moon Jae-in first pledged to increase the number of hydrogen-powered vehicles in the country up to 4,000 this year and to 1.8 million by 2030. If that target is reached, President Moon said it would generate over $22 billion in wealth, create 200,000 new jobs, and even reduce fine dust pollution by about 10% from current levels. Hydrogen cars actually help clean up fine dust when in motion, since their exhaust is only water vapor. President Moon also pledged to expand government subsidies for hydrogen taxis and trucks, which originally applied only to cars and buses. He will also seek to increase the number of hydrogen-powered buses to 2,000 and the number of charging stations to 310 by 2022, calling for a swift regulatory reform to make it happen. Before returning to Seoul, President Moon visited the nation's biggest hydrogen gas plant and gave some words of encouragement to the workers there. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to Ho Jun's report there, the government is going to expand subsidies to drivers who buy hydrogen or electric cars. According to the Environment Ministry, that means nearly 60,000 vehicles will be eligible, an increase of 25,000 from 1 year ago. The subsidies are worth about $30,000 depending on the type of car. It'll also build around 1,000 more high-speed charging stations, which are desperately needed. The subsidies, however, will not apply to cars that were already subsidized when purchased or those that are for research purposes. The ministry expects these eco-friendly cars will help improve, hopefully, anyway, the nation's air quality. South Korea exported a record amount of information and communication technology products last year, mostly on the back of strong outbound shipments of semiconductors. Our business correspondent Kim Hae-sung reports.
Korea's exports of information and communication technology products hit an all-time high in 2018. The Trade Ministry says a total of $220.4 billion worth of ICT products were shipped overseas, up more than 11% on year. Semiconductors were the top item. Exports soared to $128 billion last year, up more than 28% from 2017. Computers and related devices were up 17%, recording over $11 billion of exports. 2018 marked the first time Korea semiconductors became the first single goods category to top $100 billion in exports, but data shows a slowdown in semiconductor export growth. In the first half of 2018, chip exports grew by 42% on year, while in the second half, they only grew by about 18%. In December, chip exports actually dropped 10% on year to $16 billion on falling demand and lower prices.
Last year, semiconductors accounted for about half of all ICT exports, recouping losses from sluggish mobile and display exports. Chip exports are likely to fall in the first half of this year on slowing global demand. But with 5G wireless services really kicking in, driving chip demand for data servers, chip prices, and exports are expected to go up in the second half of this year.
In 2018 as a whole, ICT exports to China, South Korea's #1 trading partner, jumped 14% to $119 billion. Exports to Vietnam gained 8% to $28 billion, and ICT shipments to the United States climbed 13% to around $21 billion. Imports reached a little over $107 billion last year, giving Korea an information and technology trade surplus of $113.3 billion, also the highest on record so far. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Now, let's stick with some trade-related news. South Korea's exports of fresh fruit and vegetables jumped by over 16% last year, reaching $1.3 billion. The Agriculture Ministry says these items led an increase in food exports overall, which rose for a third year in a row to nearly $7 billion. Now, the biggest increase in sales was in pears. They jumped more than 20% to $80 million. They were especially popular with people in Vietnam and the United States. Grapes and strawberries saw high demand as well. Among processed foods, it might not surprise you to know that exports of instant noodles were one of the biggest exports, spiking to $400 million for the first time ever. The recent testimonies about violence and sexual assault in South Korea's sports industry has left a serious blot on the country's pursuit to become one of the world's elite sporting powerhouses. But why have such serious issues been brushed under the carpet for so long until now? Won Jung-hwan reports.
The Me Too movement that has swept through Korea's sport community may be just the tip of the iceberg. According to data released by the Korean Sport and Olympic Committee last week, 860 coaches and athletes faced disciplinary measures such as suspensions over reports of irregularities and abuse in the last 5 years. But 300 of them were either reinstated or hired elsewhere after their suspension expired, and in 24 other cases, that happened even before their punishment ended. The evidence shows that most names cannot but suffer violence and abuse in silence due to fear of retaliation. It has become practically a given that offenders in elite groups in the sports industry are able to return to the field, exposing young athletes and victims to further abuse by the same perpetrators. Coaches in particular are able to scout and foster young talents in the form of apprenticeships. As such, young athletes who fall victim to abuse often choose to stay silent in fear of ruining their careers. Scores and rankings suddenly become more important than integrity or personal principles. And this deeply rooted system has led to the notion that sexual violence is a given in the sports arena. But experts say any movement targeting wrongdoers should not arbitrarily generalize, as it could also affect innocent people and cause more harm than good.
I see this as individual acts and not problems of the system. There are many athletes and related officials out there who work really hard to achieve their dreams, so we should not really focus on the cause and effect relationship regarding recent incidents, but rather focus on ways to properly deal with guilty offenders, no matter how outstanding or important they are.
Although there is increasing public anger and disappointment over the recent abuse reports, many are hoping that there can finally be a much-needed change in the industry. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
Good morning. We'll have a similar weather to Thursday today, but the top temperatures will be even higher this Friday and into Saturday. But that's going to lead to dustier conditions for some areas. And right now, parts of the Jeollado, Chungcheongdo provinces, as well as Daegu and Gwangju, are dealing with high levels of ultra-fine dust. But more areas will be affected as the warm westerly winds will blow in as the day goes on. And it is very likely that the capital area will also be blanketed with ultra-fine dust on Saturday. So plan accordingly if you're planning to spend some time outdoors. A face mask is a must to protect ourselves from the toxic dust. For today, there will be mostly sunny skies and daily highs will range between 5 and 11 degrees Celsius, reaching up to 5 degrees here in Seoul and over in Chuncheon. And milder than average temperatures will persist into next week. Well, colder mornings are in the forecast for Monday, but -6 degrees Celsius shouldn't be too bad in the morning. That's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Friday morning here in Seoul. Do stay tuned to us here on Arirang TV. And a reminder, of course, we'll have our next newscast at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. But if we don't see you, have a wonderful weekend. Until next time, goodbye.
Literally speaking, a piece of poetry brought in by a wave.